So I'm really excited to be here. My name's Craig Hamill. I am the Digital and Innovation Learning Lead here at Direct Line Insurance Group. So if you've not heard of Direct Line before, we're a UK-based organisation that was founded in 1985. We're just over 10,000 employees wide, and we offer a range of insurance products and services that range from everything from pet, travel, motor, home, breakdown, and legal services. And in addition to this, my career has spanned over more than 20 years in terms of L&D and HR, and across a load of different verticals. So digital learning is something that I'm specializing in at the moment, but have been doing, over those 20 years. And also in addition to this, I know that we've got some people from education. I've also been a parent trustee for 2.5 years at a high school in the UK, and as part of their career steering group, advising on skills and careers for the future. So I wanted to kick off, obviously this session is all about the art of microlearning and creating those memorable learning experiences. And I wanted to kick off by saying, have you ever thought about learning as an art form? Sometimes, I don't know whether you look at a piece of art or not, but you can look at a piece of art for ages. And sometimes you're really captivated by that story that it's portraying. You're wanting to know more. It gives you that sense of curiosity. And on the other hand, you may look at it and think, I just don't get it. It's sending my brain into a constant spiral. I'm just going to walk away and have a look at that next piece of art. So often when I think about learning as that piece of art, and how to design something that creates that feeling of wow, that leaves that lasting impression and wanting learners to be curious, then I want to know more. So why in today's fast-paced world that we live in, where time is precious, where Catherine just talked about, that our attention spans are shrinking, that our attention to grab people's attention, to get them to do learning, is so much of a challenge and can prove that challenge to us. Now, when we know that microlearning can help with this, but what we need to do is ensure that whatever microlearning we are designing and delivering, it's impactful, it's memorable, and it also requires that consideration of factors such as learner needs or content relevance, and also engagement strategies, again, just covered by Catherine. Now, research shows us that the most reported benefits of microlearning are improved memory retention. There's also increased motivation and enhanced productivity. So why in some organizations are we still not reaping the benefits of microlearning, but instead maybe facing certain challenges? Well, my session today, though hopefully we're going to cover it in that short amount of time, is basically sharing my experiences over that span of 20 years in this career, but also talking about some of those experiences here at the Direct Line Group. So if you're new to microlearning or looking to enhance your existing practices, this session will hopefully give you those insights. So this is what I'm going to cover through. Now, interesting enough, you'll see that cognitive overload is on here. So this is where I might scale it back slightly. But one of the first things that we're going to do is a poll, right? We love a poll. One poll hasn't been done today, which is great. So this is where we're going to sort of look at some of those common challenges, then briefly touch on cognitive overload. And then I wanted to share those things that you need to consider when you're designing learning. And then also wanted to share some of those approaches in terms of how we've changed at Direct Line Group, moved away from traditional learning, and also some of the things in which I wanted to showcase in terms of what we've been doing. And then everybody loves a takeaway. So I'm going to leave you on those 3 top tips. So without further ado, if Christopher, you could bring up the poll for me, that would be absolutely
I am on it.
You are on it like a car bonnet. So the first thing on here is overwhelming. So if you can just choose one of these, which is the most common challenge that you associate with microlearning. So overwhelming. So this is talking about large amounts of information that are crammed into kind of that single source of multiple sources. We've got too vague. So does that content only just skim the surface? We've got one-dimensional format. So is it not diverse enough? Inconsistent quality. So is this around the number of designers that we've got involved with producing that content that's not quality checked? So it's inconsistent in terms of its look, its feel, the language that's used, and of course the lack of time. There's still not enough time to undertake that learning. And of course, once you've voted, if there's anything that's missing from this poll, then please do use chat and add them into there as well, because it'd be great to hear from you from that respect. So I think I'm going to vote as well. So there we go. If you could share the results of that poll?
Yeah, so well, let's see here. We got almost half of everybody voted. So those of you alt tab, get back on the browser tab and vote in on this one before I close the polls. There we go.
Yeah.
Some last minute voters there.
Great stuff.
All right.
So I don't think there are going to be any surprises in terms of this list. There is more than this, but these are kind of some of the top 5 challenges that in my 20 years I've had to kind of contend with and combat. So it'll be interesting to see what the outcomes come out.
Okay, so it looks like I'm closing down the poll. So those of you who are doing something else, you missed out. But looks like too vague won with about 30% of the votes, with overwhelming lack of time to undertake came in roughly around 20%, and then dwindling down into the 15%. So too vague was definitely our winner.
Too vague was the winner, yeah. And I think that's because sometimes when we look at microlearning, we think automatically, right, that's got to be really, really short, as in it's 1 minute, 2 minutes, less than 5 minutes. Sometimes it's the lack of thinking around the story that we're trying to tell that sometimes doesn't get into the detail enough. So I'm going to come on to that in terms of some of the design considerations. But of course, lack of time is up there. Again, that's because maybe you're maturing as a learning organization. Your culture is, on a trajectory, or it's quite stagnant. So sometimes because of the culture that's driving learning within our organizations, that can have an impact. And of course, the overwhelming side of things is we've got just a short amount of time, so let's cram as much information into there as possible. And that's why I wanted to kind of then touch on cognitive load. Now, I know Nidhi touched on this, which is brilliant to kind of hear, but why should we be concerned about it? Now, obviously, we've had an introduction to that in terms of essentially it being that framework that can assist us in terms of our design and how we think about as humans, that we have a limited capacity for processing that information. And when this capacity is exceeded, we start to lose interest. It starts to be less effective. And this is where I'm going to scale it back slightly. So obviously, we talked about intrinsic cognitive load. So essentially the brain capacity required to complete a task, which is determined by that task difficulty and expertise of that learner. That's often overlooked. So in my experience, we want to sheep dip everybody. We want everybody to go through that same experience, but that does not feel personalized, and it's not taken into consideration where that person is in terms of their career journey. So whether you're a new hire, you've got no industry experience, you're a new hire with industry experience, or you're a colleague who has 20 years tenure, we need to really take that into the way in which we're designing our micro-learning. You've then got the extraneous cognitive load that also Nidhi talked about, associated with, presenting that information and also the learning environment itself. Now, essentially, this is where that result is either irrelevant or there is unimportant pieces of learning. Stuff might be poorly designed. So I know we talked about one of the challenges is the sort of inconsistency in terms of the quality checks and what we're putting out there. And also there's the confusing navigational learning experience. So based on the platform that you have or where you host it, if it's in SharePoint or somewhere else, again, that experience sometimes will impact the learner and their overall learning experience, because by the time they go to do the microlearning, they're already put off. And this can often divert learners' attentions away from the time that they're then dedicated to achieving that learning outcome. Now, finally, one of the things that I also wanted to talk about with cognitive load is germane cognitive load. So this is all about our long-term memory and how this can help actually accelerate that learning process. So techniques such as using flowcharts in presentations to explain those complex concepts, or even spaced repetition, again, talked about by Nidhi, that can really help promote learning on how to react and behave with whether it's systems, process, or different situational contexts. So if we get cognitive learning theory correct, and this is applied to learning theory, then this can help us with a number of different things, whether it's breaking down those complex information into smaller, bite-sized, manageable chunks, maybe one skill or one concept at a time, rather than overwhelming people, as talked about in the challenges, whether it's reducing that extraneous load. So whether it's designing content that is now more clear, it's more concise, it's visually appearing, it taps into the different learner preferences from a multimedia media element, or whether we're actually promoting that active learning. So we're engaging learners in interactive activities, whether you're using simulations, branching scenarios, you're promoting that deeper engagement and preventing learners from consuming learning without actually applying it. Because sometimes we do that in the moment, but then we don't think about afterwards. And that's just one step to creating those memorable experiences. So hopefully that will work as a bit of a recap for you. But when we then think and we talk about this story a little bit more, again, if you can start putting any design considerations that in your experience you would consider when it comes to creating these memorable experiences. I think in my experience, what I actually love is this concept of backward design. So it's been around for a number of years now, but it's essentially made up of 3 key parts. Now, the first part is all about your starting point. So this is essentially to do with the desired outcome. So what do you want to achieve? Quite interestingly enough, in organizations, we're so solutions focused that if you were thinking about reading a book, you'd be jumping into chapter 6 before you've even done the preface or you've even thought about what the ending's going to be like. So your starting point is key. The other part of backward design is the assessment. So how will you know when you've actually achieved it? And these need to be integrated from the start. Often these are thought as a kind of a bit of an afterthought. So again, thinking about those touch points that enable you to collect that data that is going to enable you to make some data-driven decisions moving forwards. And then the third piece is around those learning activities. So what does that journey look like? What are the steps to enable you to get there through those engaging activities, but still actually having the focus on the goals and objectives that you intended? Because again, often scope creep starts to happen, and before you know it, we've got a micro-learning piece of content that is then this big, and we need to scale it back, because then that confuses our learners as to, well, this said it was micro-learning and actually it's a lot more than that. So this essentially, this backward design, is all about planning your journey. It's all about giving you a structured approach so that learning professionals don't fall into that trap of forward design, where the focus is on the learning activities, the content and topics, and the assessment, as I said, is usually an afterthought. Now, this structured way to design in micro-learning solutions then makes it easier for you, because you need to then take into account those considerations once you've got that structure. So what are the learning objectives? Who's your target audience? Most importantly, which many learning professionals forget to do, is how is this linked and connected to our organizational and L&D priorities? What impact is this going to have? And I often talk about how much effort is put into something versus the level of impact that it's actually going to have. What is the format and the delivery methods that are appropriate? So are you using video, audio, game, simulation? Are you thinking of those diverse preferences within your organization? And what is the data telling you? So sometimes it is guesswork if it's something that you initially are doing as a concept, but actually then, you know, this part of this continuous learning feedback loop is about then interpreting the data to then create those micro-learning solutions in the format that people want and the people that they need. It's then thinking about simplicity, so using that clear, concise language, avoiding irrelevant details and jargon, because that just puts people off. And as mentioned earlier, focus on that one key concept or skill. Is it relevant? So connection to your learner's prior knowledge. We talked earlier about, you know, expertise and abilities. So is it mandatory versus is it a choice? And I'm all up for creating this environment of curiosity that allows people to tap into flexible solutions that are on offer to them. Is it engaging? How do you want to capture that learner's attention? Make those considerations so you are making them curious to learn more. How are you tapping into their emotions? Are you using stories to tell, you know, to explain your learning? Are you using interactivity? So you're giving people choice, scenarios, personalized learning, stimulating active learning. Where does feedback feed into this particular loop? So are you providing immediate feedback to the learner? Are you offering opportunities as part of your micro-learning to reflect, to review, and to practice? So again, it's thinking about the pre, during, and post and telling that story. And finally, sometimes what we often do is we do stuff in silo. We often forget that there's the ability to recommend other learning. So have you considered using the opportunity to support with additional resources or tapping into a deeper dive into a topic or a theme? I'm just going to take a deep breath there because I realize I'm getting quite pacey for you. So if we think about our approach at Direct Line Group, this has evolved actually over the last few years. We've been relatively traditional, but we've been really excited to explore alternative modes of learning that cater to different perspectives and an opportunity to really change that push-pull dynamic. How many of you, put it in chat, are still knocking on the door, basically saying, come and do some learning? How great would it be to change that dynamic? And I think microlearning is part of that jigsaw puzzle that will allow us to do that. Now, it's a really exciting place to be in terms of embracing change and discovering our ways of sort of acquiring that knowledge. So what I wanted to share here was some of the things that we've done. It's been really important for us to provide our colleagues with an opportunity to learn anytime, any place, and anywhere. So we've made learning tech advancements, which includes mobile first tech, such as 7 taps, something that feels different, right, within the organization. And for those of you who've used 7 taps, you'll know that you can use it from a really simplistic to something that's really advanced in terms of its branching scenarios. What we've also done is we've looked at making sure that our instructional designers have access to a variety of tools. Now, what happens is within your organizations, your colleagues may be bored of a similar type of format or something feeling that it doesn't feel fresh or new. So how do we really exploit those tools and software that's on the market to create those memorable learning experiences? And what we've done is we've reinvested some of our budget to use that as an opportunity to layer the different learning tech on top of something or other. So it may be that we've got a RISE course that is embedded with videos that has 7 taps interwoven into it that links out to different branching scenarios and pulls people back in. So we're utilizing that learning tech to not only allow our instructional designers to evolve, but also for our organization to reap the benefits of the different experiences that are on offer. Now, we have a small digital team actually at DLG. There are only 3 others in my team, and I have a part-timer 2 days a week. And so capacity with some of our organizations is sometimes an issue. So what we've also done is explore where there's options of creating microlearning, where we have supported our subject matter experts in the organization, those in operation that really know the content throughout. And that actually accelerates the pace to success in terms of speed to results, speed to competence, because we're involving them as a wider extension of our team to give them access to some of the tools that are on offer, coupled with digital courses on how to use those tools, but also how to give them best practice tips on learning theory, which then extends the capacity within our team, which makes us be able to resolve some of those problems within the organization. One of the challenges that was mentioned earlier was about inconsistency in terms of quality. So we've introduced quality checklists, but we've also provided our SMEs with project oversight, the ability to make sure that simplicity is implemented when it comes to branding, language, terminology, relevance, and reducing cognitive overload. That builds those stakeholder relationships and wants the organization to come back for more when they start to reap the benefits in terms of the impact. I've mentioned personalized learning. So in introducing microlearning that allows you to choose your own ending, stuff that feels quite personalized from a podcast perspective, importance of storytelling. We've looked at our infrastructure and our platforms to create environments of curiosity, but also help learners with their learner experience and being able to navigate when we're often overwhelmed with so much information. We've tried to tailor that so it makes it a lot easier. We thought about the blended learning opportunity, so where traditionally face-to-face learning has been done in silo, where we can use microlearning as a pre and post as well as a during event. So digital is embedded throughout that whole learner journey. Accessibility is so important to us. As an organization, organizations out there, sometimes accessibility has been something that's forgotten, but due to the increase in organizations of neurodiverse conditions being more recognized, we feel as if we need to support those communities within our businesses. So again, it's about thinking about when you're designing your microlearning solutions that you have accessibility at the heart of what you do, as well as your internal and external customers. And then finally, the engagement drive, thinking about using data and marketing marketing to tell your story and to influence the ongoing stories. And 7 Taps can be a really good tool to help you in terms of socials as well as capturing data. So that gives you some insights, but I wanted to share with you some of these microlearning examples before I finish. So this is just showcasing that what we've done is we've tried to build a bit of a story here. You'll notice that the top 5 basically are all microlearning examples. They all feel part of what we call a skills builder. So they start off with very much a skills spotlight. We're actually using 7 Taps for this. It's less than a minute. It's essentially a card video introducing a speaker, talking to try and get the hook to get you in to learn 3 top tips, signed off with a video, and then that's the skills spotlight. That for us is enticing people into that experience to want to learn more. So then we take them through the skills on the go, right, which is an introductory to a particular topic or theme. I want a quick refresher, or I'm actually quite interested in learning about what coaching is. Okay, so we've built out a skills on the go series that allows people to access content that's less than 10 minutes. We've then got the skills soundbite, so tapping into the different formats, utilizing audio books or actually creating your own sound bites internally. And then we've got your voice. Your voice is all about hearing from your colleagues, whether it's career stories, skill stories, learning stories, apprenticeship stories. This gives us the opportunity to be able to visualize conversations taking place, but also podcasts about meaningful things. Now, outside of the microlearning agenda is then giving people that opportunity to be curious and then take a deeper dive. So again, it's thinking about your platforms and your solutions and how you bring it all together, but you're essentially creating this environment of curiosity. And this is a really exciting place to be. So just on my final slide now, so we all love a bit of a recap just to tie things up, because I know we talked about cognitive overload. You're probably overloaded out. So 3 top tips to really complement what I've talked about today, because we all love a takeaway. The first one is that focus on relevance, right? Keeping your microlearning content tightly aligned with your learner needs and goals. Identifying the most critical knowledge of skills that require and prioritize that content directly, because this will have an impact on your performance on your bottom line. So make sure it's relevant, make sure you're increasing that learner motivation and you're engaged them really early on in what I call the learning sales cycle, and you're keeping them engaged post-event as well. Embracing interactivity, so make sure your experiences are interactive, they're participatory, you explore things like simulation, scenario-based challenges. You're really using the opportunity to actively learn, but also reinforce that understanding. Think of ways in which you can pre and post learning, intended to get people excited and warmed up, but also help with the spaced repetition for what I talked about in terms of the germane cognitive load. And finally, the iterate and refine. So continuously gathering that feedback to help you with those data-driven decisions around effectiveness of your micro-learning content. Analyze the learning engagement metrics, embed that within your learning itself. That will drive you to kind of really elevate the culture of iteration and refinement, but also help you build your learning culture within the organization. So there you have it. I don't think we've got time for questions, but you'll see on the slide now a number of different things. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I've got a series of 50 posts before I'm 50 years old this year. So go and check them out and stay connected. And then we've got 2 other just versions of how we've used 7Taps. In the middle, it's a pre-thing to a session around storytelling. It's a simple use of video footage that allows people to really think about, oh, what are these subliminal messages about learning and the world that we're in terms of being pressurized, and then actually using the submit new feature function of 7Taps to record the audio feedback and use that as part of the experience. And then again, there's an insights example. So again, as well as microlearning, you can use something like 7Taps to capture that data. Please feel free to complete that survey if you really want to. It's based on another theory that I came up with around stacked for learning, which is all about skills, technology. I've forgotten the rest. Attitude, careers, knowledge, experience, and development. There you have it. So if you want to know more, then please tap into that. And that's me signing out, Christopher.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you so much, Craig. And nobody drop yet, because I have more prizes to give away and a couple calls to action. But before we get to that, Can we get a round of emojis for Craig and that? I really appreciated, again, just hearing from you, your perspective on some of these things. And again, the focus on intentionality and creativity on some of these things in drawing people in and making that shift. One question as we're wrapping up here that came up, one of the top voted questions after kind of reflecting on all of the different presentations, one of the top questions was, how do you get started with some of this stuff and transition? And one of the things that I would just share from my perspective, sitting at the top of learning in an enterprise, is find the opportunities that you have. Don't feel like you have to boil the ocean. I think that's one of the things, is we can see these things and get excited and go, now, how do we do it everywhere? And you might overload your boss or the organization, and the body will reject the organ. And what I found with my teams is to get really creative. And Craig, I loved how you just shared a number of different kinds of examples where you go, hey, maybe we're doing this, but what if we augment it with this other component or this other little piece over here that just enhances the holistic experience? So thank you. That was fantastic.